The winter night was cruel and unforgiving. As 18-year-old Daniel stumbled through the snow, his father's hunting dogs gaining on him with each labored breath. Their growls pierced the darkness behind him, trained killers released by the man who should have protected him most. Just as the lead dog lunged for Daniel's leg, a massive shadow emerged from between the trees, and the unexpected trumpeting of an elephant shattered the silence of the forest as the magnificent creature positioned itself between the terrified boy and the snarling pack. What dark secret could drive a wealthy father to set his dogs upon his own flesh and blood? And how did an elephant, an animal not native to these woods, appear at precisely the right moment to save a young man's life? Comment below with your thoughts on what happens next in this extraordinary tale of betrayal, protection, and unlikely guardians. If this story of unexpected salvation touched your heart, please like, subscribe to our channel, and share your own experiences with surprising protectors who appeared in your darkest moments. Maxwell Harrington stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, watching the snow fall on his 50-acre estate. The crystal tumbler in his hand caught the firelight as he swirled the amber liquid inside. Behind him, the massive room was adorned with hunting trophies, the heads of exotic animals mounted on the walls like conquests. "Sir," the security team. "Reports the dogs have been released as ordered," his assistant said from the doorway. Maxwell didn't turn. "And my son," last seen heading toward the eastern forest boundary. A thin smile crossed Maxwell's face. Good, he'll learn that no one betrays a Harrington. The Harrington estate was more fortress than home, a sprawling mansion of stone and glass perched on a hillside, surrounded by manicured gardens that gave way to dense forest. The property included a private lake, a helipad, and, unknown to most visitors, a collection of exotic animals housed in a state-of-the-art sanctuary hidden behind the main residence. Maxwell had built his fortune in international shipping and investments, but those who knew him well understood. His true passion was collecting rare things: art, artifacts, animals, and influence. Nothing pleased him more than possessing what others could not. His phone buzzed. Maxwell glanced at the screen and answered. Immediately. "Senator, what news?" His voice was smooth, practiced. "I see. And the legislation will proceed as discussed?" He nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Excellent. The donation will be processed tomorrow." As he hung up, Maria, the housekeeper, appeared with fresh towels. She'd served the Harrington household for 20 years, a silent witness to its secrets. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Harrington?" she asked, her eyes carefully averted. "That will be all, Maria." He dismissed her with a wave. She hesitated. "Sir, about Master Daniel, my son is no longer your concern," he cut her off sharply. "In fact, he is no longer my concern either." Maria pressed her lips together but nodded submissively. As she turned to leave, Maxwell's phone rang again. His expression darkened as he listened. "What do you mean it's gone?" he snapped, fury building in his voice. "A 4-ton elephant doesn't simply disappear. Find it immediately and find my son." "I don't care what it takes!" He hurled the phone across the room, shattering a framed photograph on the wall, one of the few showing Maxwell with a young Daniel and a woman whose face was now obscured by cracked glass. Maxwell stalked to a hidden panel in the wall, pressed his palm against it, and revealed a secure room beyond. Inside, monitors displayed every corner of the estate. He tapped a keyboard, bringing up footage from the animal sanctuary. The elephant enclosure was empty. "Impossible," he muttered. But even more disturbing was the adjacent security footage, showing the elephant moving purposefully through the woods, following the same path Daniel had taken. Maxwell Harrington didn't believe in coincidences. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone was interfering with his family affairs. And whoever they were, they would regret it. He opened a desk drawer and removed a hunting rifle, checking it methodically before loading it. If his dogs couldn't handle the situation, he would do it himself. No one took what belonged to him. Not his son, not his property, not his secrets. The storm was intensifying outside, but Maxwell Harrington had weathered worse. By morning, his problems would be solved, his property recovered, and his reputation intact. After all, money could buy anything: silence, loyalty, even justice. Or so he believed. Warmth enveloped Daniel as consciousness slowly returned. His eyes fluttered open to a humble wooden ceiling, firelight dancing across rough-hewn beams. He lay beneath heavy quilts on a narrow bed, his body aching but warm. "Welcome back," a gravelly voice said. Daniel turned his head to see an elderly man with weathered skin and kind eyes sitting in a rocking chair nearby. The man's silver hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and his hands, gnarled but strong, were busy whittling a small wooden figure. "Where am I?" Daniel's voice cracked.
"The dogs are gone, and you're safe."
The old man set aside his carving and offered a cup of steaming tea. "I'm Elijah. Been expecting you, though not quite like this." Daniel struggled to sit up, accepting the cup with trembling hands. "Expecting me? I don't understand." "And there was an elephant." He broke off, realizing how ridiculous it sounded. Elijah smiled.
"Indra. She's outside. Seems quite concerned about you." "Indra?" Daniel peered through the cabin's frost-covered window. Sure enough, the massive grey form of an elephant was visible, moving through the snow between pine trees. "But how? That's—"
"A longer story," Elijah said. "First, tell me why Maxwell Harrington would set hunting dogs on his own son." Daniel's hands tightened around the mug. 3 days ago, his life had made sense. He was the son of a wealthy, if cold, businessman, a Yale student home for winter break, heir to the Harrington fortune. Then he'd found the documents, I discovered. "I was adopted," Daniel said quietly. "My entire life has been a lie." He explained how he'd been searching for his birth certificate for a school project when he found sealed adoption papers in his father's safe. Paperwork that revealed Daniel wasn't a Harrington by blood. "I confronted him," Daniel continued, staring into his tea.
"I just wanted the truth. Who were my real parents? Why was it such a secret?" "But he—" Daniel's voice broke. "He said I was nothing. A transaction, that I should be grateful he'd given me his name, and that if I ever mentioned it again, I'd lose everything." Elijah nodded grimly. "That sounds like Maxwell. I told him I didn't care about his money. I just wanted the truth." Daniel's expression hardened. "He said if truth was what I wanted, the truth was I was no longer his son. He told me to get out."
"When I went to pack my things, I heard him ordering security to release the dogs." Elijah sighed heavily. "Maxwell Harrington has always seen people as possessions, things to own or discard, just like his animals. You know him? I worked for him. For 7 years I managed his private exotic animal collection." Elijah's expression darkened. "Until I refused to participate in his business anymore." A soft trumpeting sound came from outside. Daniel moved to the window, watching the elephant, Indra, use her trunk to clear snow from a patch of ground. "She saved my life," Daniel whispered. "How did she get free? Why did she help me?" Elijah joined him at the window. "Indra's always been special, more aware than any elephant I've known. She was brought to the sanctuary as a calf, along with—"
"Her mother?" A shadow crossed his face. "Her mother didn't survive the first year in captivity." Daniel pressed his palm against the cold glass. "My father collects endangered animals like trophies. I never questioned it before. There's more to it than collecting," Elijah said darkly. "But that's a discussion for when you're stronger."
Daniel turned from the window. "So, I need to know everything. No more secrets." Elijah studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, but first there's something you should see." He retrieved a wooden box from a shelf and handed it to Daniel. Inside was a worn photograph of a young woman standing beside a baby elephant. The woman was smiling, her eyes bright and intelligent, one hand resting gently on the elephant's head. "Who is she?" Daniel asked, though something in his heart already knew the answer. Her name was Sophia Carter. She was a wildlife researcher specializing in elephant communication and intelligence. Elijah paused. "She was also your mother, Daniel, your birth mother." Daniel stared at the photo, searching the woman's features for resemblances to his own. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, they were like looking in a mirror. "And the elephant?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "That's Indra just
After she was born." Elijah's eyes met Daniel's. "Your mother was there for Indra's birth. They had a special bond, one that apparently has extended to you."
Outside, Indra trumpeted again, as if confirming Elijah's words. "My father told me my birth parents were dead," Daniel whispered. Elijah's expression grew grave. "That's what he wanted everyone to believe. The truth, Daniel, is far more complicated and far more dangerous." Morning sunlight filtered through the cabin windows as Elijah prepared a simple breakfast. Daniel, still weak but determined, sat at the rustic wooden table watching the old man move with surprising agility for his age. "How long have you been living here?" Daniel asked, wrapping his hands around a mug of coffee. "Almost 5 years now." Elijah placed a plate of eggs and toast before him. "Ever since your father dismissed me." "What happened?" Elijah settled across from Daniel with his own plate. "I used to be somebody in the zoological world. 30 years at the National Zoo, specialized in Asian elephants, wrote books, consulted internationally." His eyes grew distant. "Your father offered me triple my salary to manage his private collection, said it was for conservation purposes." Daniel nodded. He'd heard that justification before. His father's animal sanctuary was portrayed as a noble effort to protect endangered species. "At first, it seemed legitimate," Elijah continued. "State-of-the-art facilities, veterinary care, even research partnerships. But then I noticed irregularities, animals arriving without proper documentation, species that shouldn't be in private hands, transactions that happened at night." Outside, Indra's massive form moved past the window. She seemed to be patrolling the perimeter of the small clearing where the cabin stood. "Indra was special from the beginning," Elijah said, following Daniel's gaze. "Her intelligence was extraordinary, even for an elephant. Your mother recognized it immediately. My mother worked with the animals too. Sophia was brilliant, a leading researcher in animal cognition. Maxwell hired her specifically to study
Indra. She developed methods for communication that were revolutionary. Pride filled his voice. She could ask Indra to perform complex tasks through subtle signals. They were preparing to publish their findings when he stopped abruptly.
"What?" Daniel pressed. "When everything changed." Elijah set down his fork. "Your mother discovered where the animals were really coming from. Maxwell wasn't rescuing endangered species. He was trafficking them. Rare animals captured illegally, smuggled through his shipping network, sold to collectors, or kept for himself." Aniti felt sick. "And my mother tried to stop him. She gathered evidence, prepared to expose him. But she made a critical mistake." Elijah's voice lowered. "She confronted him directly first, thinking she could appeal to his better nature." "My father doesn't have a better nature," Daniel said bitterly. "No, he doesn't." Elijah pushed his plate away. The next day, Sophia was gone. Maxwell told everyone she'd accepted a research position abroad, emergency family matter. When I questioned it, he reminded me of my non-disclosure agreement. "But you didn't believe him." "I knew Sophia would never have left without saying goodbye, especially not to Indra." Elijah stood and walked to a small desk, removing a worn
leather journal. "I started keeping records, documenting shipments, photographing animals. I was building a case." "What happened?" "Maxwell caught me accessing his private files, terminated me on the spot, threatened legal action that would have destroyed what was left of my reputation." Elijah's expression hardened, but he made a mistake.
"Letting me live nearby. I built this cabin on national forest land bordering his property, close enough to monitor the sanctuary. And Indra? How did she escape?" Elijah smiled slightly. I didn't free her, if that's what you're asking. Indra figured that out herself. She's been coming and going for months now. The security systems are designed to keep people out, not elephants in, at least not ones as clever as Indra. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. And my father never noticed? Oh, he noticed animals were behaving strangely. That's why he installed more cameras, hired more security. But Indra was careful. She always returned before dawn. Until last night. Elijah leaned forward. Tell me, Daniel, what exactly happened before you ran? Daniel described the confrontation with his father, the discovery of the adoption papers, the threats, and the release of the dogs. Did you mention Sophia's name? Elijah asked sharply. No, the papers only listed birth mother with no name. I didn't know who she was until you showed me her picture. Elijah seemed relieved. Good, because if Maxwell knew you were connecting those dots, you'd be in even greater danger. A sudden trumpeting from outside interrupted them. Elijah moved quickly to the window. We have company, he said grimly. Security team at the edge of the clearing. Daniel joined him at the window. Two men in dark uniforms were approaching cautiously, hands near their holstered weapons. Between them and the cabin stood Indra, her massive form blocking their path. They won't hurt her, will they? Daniel asked anxiously. They wouldn't dare. Indra's worth millions, more than both their salaries for a decade. Elijah reached for a shotgun propped near the door. Stay inside. I'll handle this. As Elijah stepped onto the porch, Daniel watched through the window, heart pounding. The old man stood tall, shotgun visible, but pointed downward. The security men stopped, clearly uncertain about confronting both an elephant and an armed man. Words were exchanged that Daniel couldn't hear. The men retreated, speaking into their radios. They'll be back, Elijah said when he returned inside. With more men, and probably Maxwell himself. He began gathering supplies. We need to move. Now. Where can we go? Daniel asked. Elijah looked at him solemnly. To find the truth about your mother. They had barely finished packing essentials when a soft knock at the rear door startled them. Elijah motioned for Daniel to stay back as he approached cautiously. Shotgun ready. Elijah? It's Maria, came a hushed voice. Elijah visibly relaxed, opening the door to reveal the Harrington housekeeper, her arms laden with supplies. Thank goodness you're both safe, she said, hurrying inside. Her gaze fell on Daniel, relief washing over her face. Daniel, I was so worried. Maria? Daniel was confused. What are you doing here? Helping you, of course. She set down her bags, removing a first aid kit, medications and food. Maxwell has mobilized everyone to find you. The estate is in chaos. How did you know where to find us? Elijah asked, still cautious. Maria smiled sadly. I've known about your cabin for years, Elijah. I've kept your secret, just as you've kept mine. She turned to Daniel. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you long ago. Are they settled at the table, the urgency of their escape momentarily suspended? I knew your mother, Daniel, Maria began. Sophia was more than just an employee at the estate. She was my friend. Daniel leaned forward. You knew? All this time? Maria nodded, guilt evident in her eyes. I was already head housekeeper when your father hired Sophia. Brilliant, passionate about her work with elephants. Maxwell was fascinated by her, not just her research, but her. It was the only time I ever saw him genuinely impressed by someone. They had a relationship, Daniel asked, trying to reconcile this with his image
of his cold, detached father, brief but intense.
Sophia saw something in him that the rest of us didn't, or perhaps wanted to see it. Maria twisted her hands. When she became pregnant, Maxwell was furious at first. He had never planned on children, considered them a distraction from his empire building. Then why adopt me as his son? Why not just pay her off? Because of who your mother was, Maria explained. Sophia came from a prominent family. A scandal would have damaged Maxwell's business relationships and social standing, so he struck a deal. She would give the baby up for adoption, officially. He would adopt you as his son, and she could continue her research at the sanctuary, while being close to you. So she stayed to be near me, Daniel said softly, even though she couldn't be my mother. Maria nodded. She watched you grow from a distance. Sometimes, when Maxwell was traveling, I would bring you to the sanctuary. You were too young to remember, but she would hold you, tell you stories. Indra was always there too, so gentle with
You. Daniel struggled to process this revelation. What happened to her? Why did she disappear? Maria's expression darkened. Sophia began noticing irregularities in the sanctuary operations. Animals arriving in the middle of the night.
others disappearing without explanation. She started investigating. She discovered the trafficking, Elijah interjected. Yes, but it was worse than that, Maria said. She found financial records linking Maxwell to international smuggling rings, evidence that could have sent him to prison for decades. She confronted him? Daniel asked. She threatened to expose everything unless he stopped. Maria's voice trembled. The next day, Maxwell announced she had taken a research position abroad. Her room was cleared, her belongings gone. He forbade anyone from mentioning her name. But you didn't believe it, Daniel said. I found her research journal hidden in my quarters, placed there deliberately, I think. Inside was a note. Watch over him until I return. Maria wiped away a tear. I've been waiting for her to return for 13 years. Elijah cleared his throat. Maria, we need to know. Do you think she's still alive? The housekeeper was silent for a long moment. 3 years after she disappeared, I was cleaning Maxwell's study. He'd been drinking heavily. It was the anniversary of something, though I didn't realize what at the time. His phone rang, and I heard him say, "How is our guest? Still being difficult?" Good. Stubborn women make life interesting. She looked directly at Daniel. The way he said it, I've always believed he was talking about Sophia. Daniel felt a surge of both hope and rage. He's been keeping her prisoner all this time? I don't know for certain, Maria cautioned. But Maxwell has properties all over the world, remote places with staff who never question orders. Indra's trumpeting outside interrupted them. A warning. Elijah moved to the window. More security, and they're not alone. His face hardened. Maxwell is with them. Maria gathered her things hurriedly. I need to get back before I'm missed. Take this. She pressed a small flip phone into Daniel's hand. It's untraceable. My
number is programmed in it. I'll help however I can. Daniel caught her arm. Maria, why? Why risk everything to help me? Her eyes softened. Because I promised your mother I would protect you, and because you have her heart, her goodness.
She squeezed his hand. Fine, Sophia. She left clues. The journal, the elephant, they're all part of it. What journal? Daniel asked. Elijah knows, Maria said, glancing at the older man. Now go. There's a service road behind the cabin. Follow.
At 2 miles east of the highway. As Maria slipped out the back door, Daniel turned to Elijah. What journal is she talking about? Elijah was already moving, lifting a floorboard to reveal a hidden compartment.
From it, he removed a leather-bound book. Sophia's research journal, he said, handing it to Daniel. I've been trying to decode it for years. I think you're the key to understanding it. Outside, they could hear Maxwell's voice, imperious and
cold, ordering his men to surround the cabin. There's no time, Elijah said grimly. We need to go, now.
They slipped out the back door into the forest, Indra falling in silently behind them, an unlikely guardian leading them deeper into the trees, away from Maxwell Harrington and toward the truth about Sophia Carter. The abandoned ranger station was little more than a wooden shack, but it offered shelter from the biting cold. Daniel sat on the dusty floor, his mother's journal open in his lap. Elijah had gone to scout the surrounding area, leaving him alone with Indra, who stood guard. Outside, her massive form visible through the grimy window. 3 days had passed since their escape from the cabin. 3 days of moving through forests, sleeping in makeshift shelters, and surviving on the supplies Maria had provided. Daniel's world had been upended, yet somehow he felt more centered than he had in years. He ran his fingers over his mother's handwriting, elegant, precise notes detailing her research on elephant cognition. The early pages were filled with conventional observations, but as he read deeper, the notes became more personal. Day 94, Indra continues to demonstrate extraordinary intelligence. Today, she recognized herself in a mirror, a benchmark of self-awareness rarely documented in captive elephants. When I placed a mark on her forehead, she used her trunk to touch it while looking at her reflection. Maxwell was impressed, though I suspect more by the financial implications than the cognitive significance. Day 21, Breakthrough in Communication. Indra now recognizes over 40 symbols representing objects, actions, and emotions. She can construct simple sentences by selecting sequences of symbols. Maxwell wants to showcase this ability to potential investors, but I've convinced him to wait until the research is more robust. Daniel turned the page, finding a photograph of his mother standing beside a younger Indra. They were positioned before a board covered with symbols, circles, squares, triangles in various colors and patterns. Sophia was beaming with pride. A soft sound from outside drew his attention. Indra had moved closer to the window, her trunk extending toward him. Hesitantly, Daniel approached, placing his hand on the glass. Indra pressed her trunk against the other side, a gesture so gentle. It was hard to believe it came from such a massive creature. "She remembers you," Elijah said, appearing in the doorway. "Elephants never forget, especially those they consider family." Daniel turned, surprised. "How long was she with my mother?" "Almost 4 years, from the day she was born until Sophia disappeared." Elijah set down a small bundle of firewood. Their bond was unlike anything I'd seen in 40 years of working with elephants. As Elijah built a fire in the small stove, Daniel continued reading. Day 203. Indra's connection to Daniel grows stronger. Today she was agitated until I brought him to the sanctuary. She created a protective circle around us, keeping other handlers away. Maxwell would disapprove if he knew how often I bring his son here, but what he doesn't know won't hurt him. Daniel looked up. "She writes about me." Elijah nodded. "Sophia found ways to spend time with you. Volunteered to babysit when your nanny had days off. Brought you to the sanctuary under the guise of early science education." Daniel struggled to reconcile these loving accounts with his childhood memories.
"I don't remember any of this. You were very young, 3, 4 at most when she disappeared." Daniel turned more pages, finding entries that grew increasingly concerned. Day 341. Something is wrong at the sanctuary. New animals arriving without documentation.
Maxwell dismissive when I questioned him. Need to investigate further. Day 356. Evidence of trafficking impossible to ignore. Discovered shipping manifests in Maxwell's study. Endangered species being moved through his company's cargo ships. Must gather more proof before going to authorities. The entries became more erratic, the handwriting more hurried. Day 370. Maxwell knows I'm investigating. Threatened to restrict my access to Daniel if I continue poking around in matters that don't concern me. Must be more careful. Day 385. Found the missing link. Financial records connecting Maxwell to international buyers. Have copied everything. Will contact wildlife authorities tomorrow, taking precautions in case Maxwell retaliates. Taught Indra emergency protocol today. She understands the danger. The journal ended abruptly after that entry. Daniel closed it, a weight settling in his chest. "She knew she was in danger," he said quietly. "Sophia was always one step ahead," Elijah replied, poking at the fire. "If she left clues, they'll be in that journal." Daniel reopened the book, examining it more carefully. The binding seemed thicker than it should be for the number of pages. He ran his fingers along the inside cover and felt a slight bulge. "There's something hidden here," he said, carefully working his fingernail under the lining paper. It peeled back to reveal a small pocket containing a folded paper and a key. Daniel unfolded the paper, a map with a location marked in red. The key was small, tarnished brass with a number etched into it. 437, a storage locker, Elijah said, examining the key. The map shows a facility about 30 miles from here. Outside, Indra trumpeted softly, drawing their attention. She had moved to the edge of the clearing, her head raised as if listening. "Something's wrong," Elijah said, instantly alert. He doused the fire and began gathering their supplies. "We need to move." Daniel tucked the journal, map, and key into his backpack. "How could they have found us?" "Maxwell has resources beyond what you can imagine. Thermal imaging, tracking dogs, probably even satellite surveillance." Elijah handed Daniel a heavy coat. "The ranger station is on his maps. We've stayed too long." They slipped out the back door into the gathering dusk. Indra was waiting, oddly still and attentive. When Daniel approached, she lowered her massive head, presenting her neck. "What is she doing?" Daniel whispered. Elijah looked amazed. "She wants you to check something. Look closely." Daniel examined Indra's neck and found a thin leather cord nearly hidden in the folds of her skin. Attached to it was a small metal locket. His fingers trembled as he carefully opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph, the same woman from the journal holding an infant. On the back, written in minuscule script, "Always together, even when apart. Find me at the beginning." "My mother," Daniel breathed, staring at the image. "She's been trying to communicate all this time, through Indra." Distant voices reached them, men calling to each other through the trees. "We need to go," Elijah urged. "The storage locker, it's our next step." As they moved deeper into the forest, Daniel felt a strange sense of purpose. The cold, the danger, the uncertainty, none of it mattered compared to the truth he was uncovering. For the first time in his life, he wasn't walking the path laid out by Maxwell Harrington. He was following the breadcrumbs left by Sophia Carter, his real mother. And alongside him walked an elephant, an impossible guardian connecting him to a parent he couldn't remember, but whose love had somehow reached across 13 years of separation. Maxwell Harrington paced his office, fury radiating from him like heat. 4 days since Daniel's escape, 4 days of incompetence from his security team. "You're telling me you lost track of an 18-year-old boy and a 4-ton elephant?" He snarled at the security chief standing before him. "Sir, we followed their trail to an abandoned ranger station, but nothing." "I don't pay you for excuses." Maxwell slammed his fist on the desk. "Double the search teams. Use the helicopter. I want them found." "Yes, sir." The man hesitated. "Sir, there's something else. A reporter has been asking questions in town. About—" "The sanctuary." Maxwell froze. "What kind of questions?" "About animal acquisition, staffing changes. Specifically asked about Dr. Carter's departure 13 years ago." Maxwell's expression darkened. "Who is this reporter?" "Lydia Chen from the Herald, investigative journalist, award winner. Get me everything on her, now!" As the security chief departed, Maxwell unlocked a hidden safe behind a painting. Inside was a folder labeled Carter. The contents, photographs of Sophia, copies of research papers, and surveillance reports, documented 13 years of obsession. The final report included a photograph of a remote cabin deep in the Montana wilderness. Maxwell touched the image almost tenderly. "Still stubborn after all these years?" he murmured. His intercom buzzed. "Sir, Maria is requesting to speak with you." Maxwell composed himself. "Send her in." The housekeeper entered, her expression carefully neutral. "You wanted the inventory of Daniel's room, sir?" "Yes." "Anything unusual?" "Nothing, sir. His passport and credit cards are still there. He took only clothes and some personal items." Maxwell studied her. Maria had been with the household since before Daniel's arrival. She was discreet, efficient, and, he suspected, more observant than she let on. "Maria, you've been with us a long time. Daniel might contact you. I haven't heard from him, sir. But if you do," Maxwell continued smoothly, "you'll let me know." "Immediately. Family matters should remain private. Wouldn't you agree?" The threat was implicit. Maria nodded. "Of course, Mr. Harrington." After she left, Maxwell made a phone call. "Increase security at the Montana property. Our guest might have visitors soon." Across town, Lydia Chen sat in her modest office at the Herald, walls covered with awards and front pages from her investigations. At 34, she had built a reputation for exposing corporate corruption, particularly environmental crimes. She studied the notes from her interviews with former Harrington estate employees. Most were reticent, bound by non-disclosure agreements. But patterns emerged: mysterious animal deliveries, staff abruptly dismissed, and the sudden departure of Dr. Sophia Carter 13 years ago. Her phone rang. "Chen, I have information about the Harrington Animal Sanctuary," a woman's voice said, "and about Sophia Carter." Lydia straightened. "I'm listening, not over the phone. Meet me at Riverside Park, West Entrance. In an hour." The line went dead. Lydia grabbed her recorder and headed out, unaware that her office had been under surveillance for days. At the park, an elderly woman in a gardener's uniform approached Lydia's bench. "You're investigating Maxwell Harrington," the woman said, without preamble. "Yes, and you are?" "Eleanor Phillips. I was head veterinarian at the Harrington Sanctuary until 10 years ago." She glanced around nervously. "What I'm about to tell you violates my NDA, but some things matter more than legal agreements." For the next 30 minutes, Eleanor detailed how the sanctuary operated as a front for wildlife trafficking. Animals acquired illegally, documented as rescues, then sold to private collectors or used for experimental research. Sophia Carter discovered the operation, Eleanor explained. She was going to expose everything. "And then she disappeared," Lydia noted. "Officially, she took a position overseas. But the night before I treated her for a minor cut. She mentioned taking her son and leaving the country." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Maxwell Harrington doesn't have a son." Lydia frowned. "Yes, he does. Daniel Harrington." Eleanor looked shocked. "That's impossible. Daniel is Sophia's son. I was there when he was born." Lydia's investigative instincts blazed. "Are you saying Maxwell Harrington's son is actually Sophia Carter's child?" "Yes. She became pregnant during their relationship."
Maxwell forced her to give up the child officially, then adopted him himself, keeping both the child and Sophia under his control. And now both Daniel and one of Harrington's elephants are missing, Lydia mused. Eleanor paled. "Which elephant?"
"The reports didn't specify. If it's Indra, then—" Eleanor stopped herself. "Find Daniel Harrington. He's the key to all of this." After Eleanor left, Lydia called her editor. "I need resources for a major investigation. Maxwell Harrington is involved in wildlife trafficking, and I believe he may be responsible for the disappearance of a researcher 13 years ago." "Harrington? He's connected to half the politicians in the state. We need solid evidence. I'm working on it." As Lydia left the park, she didn't notice the black SUV that pulled away from the curb to follow her. In his home office that evening, Maxwell received a call from his head of security. "Sir, we've identified the leak Eleanor Phillips met with." "The reporter today?" Maxwell sighed. "Handle it. The usual arrangement." "And the reporter?" Maxwell considered. "Monitor for now. If she gets too close, we'll discredit her. Plant something in her apartment if necessary." He hung up and returned to studying the satellite imagery of the forest surrounding his estate. The thermal imaging showed nothing unusual, but Maxwell knew better than to underestimate his opponents. His son was out there, getting closer to the truth. The elephant, Sophia's elephant, was helping him. It was almost poetic. Maxwell poured himself a whiskey and contemplated the chessboard on his desk. The pieces were arranged mid-game, a match he'd been playing against himself for years. He moved a black knight, capturing a white pawn. "Your move, Sophia," he murmured. "Your move." The storage facility was located in an industrial area on the outskirts of town. Daniel and Elijah approached cautiously, having left Indra hidden in a wooded area nearby, an elephant being somewhat conspicuous for a covert operation. "Unit 437, Daniel murmured, scanning the rows of numbered doors. "There." The small padlock yielded to the key from Sophia's journal. Daniel lifted the rolling door, revealing a space no larger than a walk-in closet, filled with dust-covered boxes. She planned. "For this," Elijah said softly. Even before she disappeared, they worked methodically, opening boxes labeled with innocuous titles like winter clothes and kitchen supplies. Inside, they found research notes, hard drives, and file folders, all documenting Maxwell's illegal wildlife operation. "This is enough to put him away for decades," Elijah said, examining shipping manifests that showed endangered species being transported through Harrington shipping lines. Daniel was only half listening, focused on a box labeled Family Photos. Inside were pictures of Sophia holding an infant, him, and detailed journals of his early development, notes a mother would keep about her child's first words, first steps.
"She never stopped being my mother," he whispered, throat tight with emotion. At the bottom of the box, he found a leather-bound volume different from the others. This journal was personal, not scientific. Daniel opened it reverently. "I'm starting."
"This journal for you, Daniel. Someday, when you're old enough to understand, I hope you'll read these words and know how deeply you were loved, even when I couldn't be with you openly." Daniel's vision blurred with tears as he turned the pages, reading his mother's account of her life before and after his birth. She had been a rising star in wildlife research, specializing in elephant cognition, when she met Maxwell Harrington at a conservation fundraiser. Maxwell was magnetic, brilliant in his way. He offered resources for my research beyond anything academia could provide, a private sanctuary where I could work without grant applications or publication pressure. It seemed too good to be true, and it was. Their relationship developed quickly, intensely. When Sophia became pregnant, Maxwell's true character emerged. He was furious at first, then calculating. A child didn't fit his plans, but scandal didn't either. The solution he proposed was elegant in its cruelty. I would give birth quietly, sign adoption papers, and he would adopt you as his heir. I could remain at the sanctuary, continue my research, and be near you, though never as your mother. I agreed for 2 reasons. To stay close to you, and because by then I had begun to suspect the true nature of Maxwell's conservation work. Someone needed to gather evidence, and I was in the perfect position. As Daniel read on, the journal detailed Sophia's growing horror as she uncovered the extent of Maxwell's wildlife trafficking operation. Endangered species captured illegally, smuggled through his shipping network, sold to private collectors for millions. The sanctuary is a front, a legitimizing cover for his real business. The animals the public sees are only a fraction of what passes through here. The rest disappear into private collections worldwide, or worse, are used for parts in the black market medicine trade. I've been documenting everything, creating backup. Copies preparing to go to the authorities, but I need to be careful. Maxwell is powerful, connected to judges, politicians, law enforcement. One wrong move, and I could lose everything, including you. The most recent entries detailed her growing bond with Indra and her plan to escape with both Daniel and the elephant. Indra continues to show remarkable intelligence and emotional depth. Today I showed her your picture, and she touched it gently with her trunk. There's something special about her connection to you, almost as if she recognizes you as part of our unusual family. I've been teaching Indra special commands, ways to find you, protect you. Maxwell thinks it's just research, but I'm preparing for contingencies. If something happens to me, Indra might be your only link to the truth. The final entry was dated 3 days before her disappearance. Maxwell knows.
"I saw him watching me copy files today. He was too casual, too unconcerned. He's planning something. I've hidden the evidence where he won't find it, left breadcrumbs only you would understand. If I disappear, follow the elephant. She knows the way home. Love you, my son. Whatever happens, remember that. And remember that sometimes the greatest acts of courage look like patience. I will wait as long as it takes to be reunited with you." Daniel closed the journal, his hands trembling.
She knew he was going to do something to her. She prepared for it. Elijah squeezed his shoulder. Sophia was always thinking ahead. "Follow the elephant," she wrote. "What do you think it means?" Daniel's mind raced. The locket around Indra's neck had a photo and a message. "Find me at the beginning." The beginning of what? Of Indra's life, perhaps? Elijah suggested. She was born at the sanctuary. Daniel shook his head. No, that's too obvious. My father would have searched there. He flipped back through the journal, scanning for clues. A passage caught his eye. I've taken Daniel to the lake house twice now. Maxwell never goes there. Too rustic for his tastes. Indra loves the water. I watch my son and my elephant splashing together and dream of a different life for us all. The lake house, Daniel said. It's a property my father owns but never uses, about 3 hours north of the estate. I barely remember it. Could Sophia have meant that as the beginning? Elijah asked. It's where she first imagined us as a
family. Her, me, and Indra. Away from my father's control. Daniel gathered the journals. We need to go there. A noise outside froze them both. Footsteps approaching quickly. Someone found us, Elijah whispered. They grabbed the most essential evidence and slipped out a side maintenance door just as flashlights swept the main corridor. From their hiding place behind a dumpster, they watched as 2 men in security uniforms entered the storage unit. We need to get back to Indra, Daniel said, before they find her too. They circled around the building, keeping to the shadows, and made their way back to the wooded area where they'd left the elephant. To
their relief, she was still there, waiting patiently. Daniel approached her, showing the journal. We need to go to the lake house, Indra. Do you remember? The beginning? The elephant's intelligent eyes seemed to focus on the book. She raised her trunk, touching the cover gently, then turned northward, as if indicating direction. I think she understands, Elijah said, amazed. Daniel placed his hand on Indra's massive shoulder. Then let's go find my mother. They traveled by night, following back roads and forest paths, guided by Elijah's weathered paper maps and, strangely, Indra's seeming intuition about their direction. During daylight hours, they rested in abandoned barns or dense woodland, always alert for signs of pursuit. On the 3rd day, as they camped in a secluded clearing, Daniel sat beside Indra, his back against her warm flank, reading more of his mother's journals. She knew you from birth, Daniel said to the elephant, who was contentedly pulling at patches of grass. You were both babies when you met. Elijah, tending a small fire, looked up. Indra was barely 2 months old when she arrived at the sanctuary. Her mother had been killed by poachers. My mother writes about bottle feeding her, Daniel said, turning a page, about how Indra would follow her everywhere. She called her my other child. The bond between them was extraordinary, Elijah agreed. Most captive elephants tolerate humans at best. Indra and Sophia had something different. Daniel continued reading, finding entries that increasingly mentioned him as an infant and toddler. Brought Daniel to the sanctuary again today. Maxwell is in Singapore for 2 weeks, so we have precious time together. Indra was so gentle with him, used her trunk to offer him an apple, watched over him while he napped. Sometimes I imagine a life where the 3 of us could be together openly. My human child and my elephant child, both so intelligent, both so full of love. She brought me to see you, Daniel said to Indra, looking into her intelligent eyes. We knew each other when I was little. As if responding, Indra raised her trunk, touching Daniel's face with surprising gentleness. The gesture unlocked something in his mind, a flash of memory, sunshine, laughter, the feeling of a strong trunk lifting him playfully, while a woman's voice called out in mock alarm. I remember, he whispered. Not clearly, but feelings. Being happy? Safe. Elijah watched them thoughtfully. Sophia was researching interspecies bonds, specifically how elephants form attachments to humans. Indra was her primary subject. It went beyond research, Daniel said. Listen to this. Today I taught Indra and Daniel the same signal, a simple hand gesture that means safety, family, home. When Daniel made the sign, Indra immediately came to him, protective and attentive. The connection between them transcends ordinary animal-human relationships. They recognize each other as kin, though
neither can express it in words. Daniel set the journal down, thinking.
Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and made a circular motion, followed by a gentle tap on his heart. Indra's reaction was immediate. She straightened, eyes focused on Daniel, and made a soft rumbling sound deep in her throat. She stepped closer, lowering her massive head to his eye level. "She remembers," Elijah said, astonished. After all these years, Daniel felt tears welling in his eyes. "We were a family, me, my mother, and Indra. My father took that away from us." Elijah moved closer, examining the locket still hanging around Indra's neck. "May I?" Daniel nodded, and Elijah carefully opened the small metal case. He studied the photograph and inscription, then turned the locket over in his hands. "There's something else here," he said, pointing to tiny markings on the back of the locket. "Coordinates." Daniel looked closely. Etched into the metal were numbers, latitude and longitude. "She left us a map," Daniel said. "The lake house must be at these coordinates." Elijah pulled out his maps again. "Let me check. Yes, this location is about 15 miles north of where we are now. Remote area near a small lake. We can reach it by tomorrow night," Daniel said, a new determination in his voice. Elijah looked concerned. "Daniel, we need to be realistic. We've found evidence of your father's crimes, learned about your connection to Sophia and Indra. But after 13 years, she's alive," Daniel said firmly. "I can feel it, and so can Indra." As if confirming his words, the elephant raised her trunk and released a soft trumpet call.
"There's something else," Daniel continued, turning to the last pages of the journal. "My mother wasn't just researching elephant cognition. She was developing a communication system, symbols Indra could understand and respond to. She writes,
About teaching Indra emergency protocols, escape routes. Maxwell would have dismantled any such system after Sophia disappeared," Elijah pointed out. "Not if he didn't know about all of it." Daniel's eyes brightened with realization. The symbols, the hand gestures, they were for emergencies. My mother was preparing for something to go wrong. He flipped through the journal frantically until he found what he was looking for, a page with drawings of simple symbols. "Here," he said, pointing to a square with a diagonal line through it. "This means danger, and this one," he indicated. "A circle with a dot in the center means stay together." Daniel stood and drew the symbols in the dirt with a stick, large enough for Indra to see. The elephant watched attentively, her trunk moving slightly as if tracing the shapes in the air. "And this," Daniel said, drawing a final symbol, a simple house shape, "means home." Indra stepped forward, placing one massive foot precisely on the house symbol. She trumpeted again, louder this time. "She's confirming," Elijah said, his skepticism fading. "The lake house is where we need to go." As night fell, they prepared to continue their journey. Daniel packed the journals carefully in his backpack, along with the evidence of his father's wildlife trafficking operation. But his mind was fixed on a single goal: finding Sophia Carter, the mother he barely remembered but whose love had reached across 13 years through journals, an elephant, and fragments of memory. They set out under a canopy of stars, Indra leading the way with surprising certainty for an animal far from her natural habitat. Daniel walked beside her, one hand resting on her weathered skin, feeling a connection that transcended the ordinary boundaries between species. "We're coming, Mom," he whispered into the night. "We're coming home." Behind them, invisible in the darkness but drawing steadily closer, two black SUVs moved along the forest road, headlights extinguished. In the lead vehicle, Maxwell Harrington studied a satellite map showing 3 heat signatures moving through the forest, 2 human, 1 much larger. "Keep your distance," he instructed the driver. "I want to see where they're going." In the passenger seat, the security chief checked his weapon. "And when we find out," Maxwell's expression was cold, "then we finish this, once and for all." Dawn painted the forest in pale gold as Daniel and Elijah approached the small cabin where they'd spent the night. They had left Indra hidden in a dense thicket nearby, covered with branches and foliage, a surprisingly effective camouflage for a An animal her size, especially given her cooperation in remaining still. "We should reach the lake house by nightfall," Elijah said, folding his map. "If we keep to the forest and avoid—" He froze mid-sentence. The cabin door hung open, swinging slightly in the morning breeze. They had closed it firmly when they left to check on Indra. Daniel reached for Elijah's arm, but the older man motioned him to stay back. Silently, Elijah retrieved the shotgun he'd hidden under the cabin's porch and approached cautiously. A twig snapped in the forest behind them. Daniel whirled to see 4 men in tactical gear emerging from the trees, weapons raised. "Daniel Harrington," one called. "Your father wants you to come home." Elijah stepped out of the cabin, shotgun at the ready. "The boy stays with me." The security team spread out, creating a perimeter. Their leader, a hard-faced man with military bearing, addressed Elijah. "Mr. Kennedy, you're in violation of your non-disclosure agreement and trespassing on Harrington property."
"Lower your weapon and surrender the boy." "This is national forest land," Elijah countered. "And Daniel is 18, legally an adult who can make his own decisions." The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Daniel's mind raced. They were outnumbered,
Outgunned, but they had one advantage the security team didn't know about. Daniel raised his hand casually to his mouth, as if nervous, and whistled 3 short notes, followed by 1 long one. To the security team, it probably sounded like stress, but it was another of the signals he'd found in his mother's journal. The response was immediate and dramatic. From the forest came a thunderous crashing, and Indra burst into the clearing, branches and foliage falling from her massive form. She trumpeted furiously, charging directly at the security team. Chaos erupted. The men scattered, their training no match for the primal fear, triggered by 4 tons of charging elephant. 2 fired shots into the air, attempting to frighten Indra, but she was undeterred. "Run!" Elijah shouted to Daniel, using the distraction to fire the shotgun over the security team's heads. Daniel didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted into the forest, knowing Indra would follow. Behind him, he heard shouts, more gunfire, and Elijah's voice raised in defiance. He wanted to turn back for the old man, but a massive form appeared beside him, Indra, keeping pace surprisingly well for her size, using her bulk to clear a path through the underbrush. Daniel ran until his lungs burned, finally collapsing behind a fallen tree. Indra stood guard, her ears flicking back and forth, listening for pursuit. "Elijah!" Daniel gasped, guilt washing over him. "We left him." Indra's trunk reached down, touching his shoulder almost consolingly. Then her head lifted, alert to a sound Daniel couldn't hear. Moments later, a figure emerged from the trees, but it wasn't Elijah. Maxwell Harrington stood before them, impeccably dressed despite the wilderness setting, not a hair out of place. He carried no weapon, yet radiated more danger than the armed security team. "Daniel," he said, his voice eerily calm, "this has gone far enough." Daniel scrambled to his feet, backing away until he felt Indra's solid presence behind him. "Where's Elijah?" he demanded. "Mr. Kennedy is being escorted back to civilization," Maxwell said dismissively, "where he'll face consequences for kidnapping my son and stealing my property." His cold gaze shifted to Indra. "Both pieces of my
"Property. I know everything," Daniel said, finding courage in his rage.
"About my mother, about what you did to her, about your wildlife trafficking operation." If Maxwell was surprised, he didn't show it. "What I did was protect you from a mentally unstable woman who would have ruined your life with her fantasies."
"And delusions." "Liar!" Daniel shouted. "I've read her journals. I've seen the evidence of your crimes." "Evidence?" Maxwell smiled thinly. "You mean the creative writings of a woman obsessed with animals to the point of anthropomorphizing them?"
Who became convinced of conspiracy theories when her research failed to yield results? His father's smooth confidence shook Daniel briefly. Maxwell had always been persuasive, able to reshape reality with nothing but his words, and unwavering. "Certainty," She documented everything, Daniel insisted. The smuggling operations, the illegal acquisitions, all of it. Fabrications, Maxwell waved dismissively. Sophia was brilliant but unstable. When her mental health deteriorated, I arranged the best care for her. You kidnapped her. I protected her and you from the consequences of her delusions. Granti took a step closer. Come home, Daniel. This fantasy has gone on long enough. Indra shifted behind Daniel, trunk raised as if sensing the tension. Maxwell eyed the elephant with calculation. Remarkable animal, he said. Worth millions on the private market, especially given her unusual cognitive abilities. She's not
A commodity, Daniel said fiercely. She's family. Maxwell's expression hardened. This is exactly the kind of anthropomorphic nonsense Sophia filled your head with during those unauthorized visits to the sanctuary. Elephants are assets, Daniel. Valuable ones. Where is she? Daniel demanded. Where's my mother? Something flickered in Maxwell's eyes, a calculation perhaps, or a decision being made. Sophia Carter is no longer your concern. Is she alive? Daniel pressed. Maxwell checked his watch. This conversation is over. My security team will be here momentarily.
You're coming home, Daniel, and the elephant is returning to the sanctuary, and if I refuse, then things become unpleasant. Maxwell's voice remained conversational, which somehow made the threat more chilling. Elijah Kennedy has already been arrested for kidnapping. The journalist asking questions about our family has been dealt with. And as for Sophia, he shrugged. Accidents happen in remote locations. Red fury clouded Daniel's vision. He lunged forward, fists raised, only to be blocked by Indra's trunk, gently but firmly holding him back. The elephant trumpeted, not in rage but as if in warning, just as the forest around them came alive with movement. Security personnel emerged from all sides, weapons drawn. It's over, son, Maxwell said, genuine regret coloring his voice for the first time. Come home. Daniel looked at the armed men, at his father's implacable expression, at Indra standing protective beside him. He thought of Elijah, possibly injured or arrested, of the journalist dealt with, of his mother held captive for 13 years. In that moment, Daniel Harrington made a decision that would change everything. I am going home, he said quietly. But not with you. He raised his hand, making the circular motion, followed by a tap on his heart, the signal for family that his mother had taught both him and Indra 13 years before. What happened next would be debated, questioned, and ultimately buried by Maxwell Harrington's legal team, but not before it changed the course of 3 lives forever. When Daniel opened his eyes, the world was moving. Indra's broad back swayed beneath him as she navigated through dense forest, her powerful legs eating up the distance with surprising speed and silence for an animal her size. Memory returned in fragments. The confrontation with his father, the security team closing in, Indra kneeling suddenly to allow him to climb onto her back, and then the thunderous charge through the human perimeter. Gunshots had rung out, but whether they were warning shots or aimed at them, Daniel couldn't be sure. What he did know was that Indra had carried him away from danger with the determination of a mother protecting her young. Now, as the adrenaline faded, pain bloomed in his side. His hand came away bloody when he touched it. We need to stop, he murmured, patting Indra's shoulder. As if understanding, the elephant slowed and carefully knelt, allowing Daniel to slide to the ground. The bullet had only grazed him, tearing through his jacket and leaving a shallow furrow along his ribs. Using his water bottle, he cleaned the wound as best he could and bound it with strips torn from his t-shirt. Thanks for the rescue, he told Indra, who watched him with concerned eyes. But now we're alone, and I don't know where we're going. Indra seemed untroubled by this dilemma. Once Daniel had remounted, she continued with purpose, following a route only she seemed to know. Hours passed. The forest thinned, giving way to meadows, then thickened again as they climbed higher into the mountains. Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness, the blood loss and exhaustion taking their toll. He woke fully when Indra stopped. Before them stood a high fence marked with no trespassing signs. Beyond it, he could see buildings nestled in a verdant valley. "Where are we?" he wondered aloud. Indra approached the fence, raising her trunk to touch a keypad mounted on a gate. Daniel stared in disbelief as she deliberately pressed a sequence of buttons with surprising dexterity. The gate swung open. "Impossible," Daniel whispered. Yet Indra proceeded through as if she'd done it many times before, following a dirt road toward the compound. As they drew closer, Daniel saw it wasn't a compound exactly, but rather a sanctuary. Animal enclosures, barns, and medical facilities spread across several acres, all designed to blend harmoniously with the natural environment. A woman emerged from the main building, alerted by their approach. She showed no surprise at the sight of an elephant carrying a wounded young man, only concern and immediate action. "He's injured," she called to someone inside. "Prepare the medical room." Daniel slid from Indra's back, his legs buckling. The woman caught him, surprisingly strong for her slight frame. "Indra brought you," she said, helping him toward the building. "You must be Daniel." Through the haze of pain, her words registered. "You know who I am?" "We've been waiting for you for a very long time," she replied. "I'm Dr. Helena Wright. Welcome to True Haven." Inside, Daniel was laid on an examination table where a man in medical scrubs efficiently treated and bandaged his wound. "Just a graze," the doctor confirmed. "You're lucky." "Where am I?" Daniel asked as Helena handed him a glass of water. "What is this place?" "A sanctuary," she replied, "for animals and people who need protection from those who would exploit them." Once, Daniel was patched up and seated in Helena's office with a blanket and hot tea, she explained further. True Haven was established 15 years ago as a legitimate rescue and rehabilitation center for endangered species, she said. "But we have another purpose, countering the illegal wildlife trade, particularly the operations of collectors."
"Like your father." "You know about Maxwell's trafficking," Daniel said. "Not a question. We've been documenting it for years," Helena confirmed.
"Building a case that even his political connections can't make disappear. But you need evidence," Daniel realized, thinking of the journals and documents in his backpack. "We have quite a bit already," Helena said, gesturing to filing cabinets lining one wall. "But yes, first-hand documentation would strengthen our case considerably." "I have that," Daniel said. "But first," he hesitated, almost afraid to ask the question burning in his mind. "My mother, Sophia Carter. Do you know her?" Helena's expression softened. "Sophia was my colleague and dear friend. We worked together at Cornell before she accepted the position with your father." "Was?" Daniel's heart sank at her use of past tense. "Is," Helena corrected quickly. "Sophia is very much alive, Daniel. In fact, she helped establish True Haven." Hope surged through him. "She's here." Helena's expression grew complicated. "Not
"Exactly. After she discovered the extent of Maxwell's trafficking operation, Sophia contacted me. We planned to document everything, then take it to federal authorities."
But before we could, she disappeared. My father took her, Daniel said bitterly. Yes, but not before she managed to send me critical evidence. Using that, we established True Haven as both a legitimate sanctuary and a countermeasure against traffickers like Maxwell. Helena leaned forward. "For 13 years, we've been rescuing animals from illegal shipments, documenting the network and building a case. But my mother, we never stopped looking for her," Helena assured him. 3 years ago, we located her at a remote property in Montana, owned by one of Maxwell's shell corporations. Heavily guarded, impossible to approach without risking her life. "She's still a prisoner," Daniel said, anger and heartbreak warring
in his chest. "Yes, but she's been planning just as we have."
Helena stood and moved to a cabinet, retrieving a file. "Sophia managed to smuggle out messages. Not often, maybe once a year, but enough to let us know she was alive and working on an escape plan." She handed Daniel a paper covered with what appeared to be random symbols, circles, squares, and lines arranged in patterns. This is her communication system, he realized. The same one she developed with Indra. Helena nodded. Exactly. Symbols that would appear meaningless to anyone but those who knew the key. Her last message came 6 months ago. She pointed to a sequence at the bottom of the page. It translates roughly to, when the child and the elephant arrive together. The time will be right. Be ready. Daniel looked up, stunned. She knew I would find Indra, that we would come here. Sophia has always played the long game, Helena said, with admiration. She taught Indra the route to True Haven years ago during the sanctuary's establishment. She knew if anything happened to her, Indra would be the key to connecting you to your true heritage and to the evidence needed to bring Maxwell to justice. And now we're here, Daniel said, understanding dawning. My mother's plan worked. Part of it, Helena cautioned. You and Indra are safe, but Sophia is still captive, and now that you've escaped, Maxwell will be more vigilant than ever. Daniel thought of Elijah, captured by his father's security team, of the journalist who had been dealt with, of his mother, imprisoned for 13 years while planning a reunion with the son she'd been forced to give up. We need to finish this, he said with new determination. Not just for my mother, but for all the animals my father has trafficked, all the people he's hurt. Helena studied him, seeing Sophia's resolve in his young face. We have resources, Daniel. People committed to ending wildlife trafficking, but moving against someone as powerful as Maxwell Harrington is dangerous. I
have evidence, Daniel said, opening his backpack to reveal the journals and documents.
And I have Indra, living proof of my mother's research and my father's crimes. Outside the window, Indra stood in a meadow, finally free after years of captivity, yet choosing to remain close to the building where Daniel recovered. She's waiting, Daniel said softly, for all of us to be reunited. Helena followed his gaze. Then let's make that happen. It's time to bring Sophia home. The conference room at True Haven buzzed with activity as Helena assembled her team. Maps and photographs covered the walls, and computer screens displayed satellite imagery of Maxwell Harrington's properties. Daniel sat at the center, surrounded by conservationists, wildlife experts, and, surprisingly, 2 federal agents. Special.
Agent Ramirez, Fish and Wildlife Service, said a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s. We've been building a case against your father's trafficking network for 5 years.
The challenge has been gathering evidence that would stand up in court, added her colleague, Agent Torres. Maxwell Harrington's political connections have protected him so far. Daniel spread out the documents from his backpack, shipping manifests, financial records, and his mother's meticulously documented research. Will this help? He asked. Agent Ramirez examined the papers, her expression growing increasingly satisfied. This is exactly what we needed. Direct evidence linking Maxwell to illegal shipments of endangered species. Helena projected a complex diagram onto the main screen, a web of companies, properties, and individuals connected to Maxwell Harrington. Your father's operation isn't just about collecting rare animals, she explained to Daniel. It's an international network that spans continents. Maxwell's shipping company provides the perfect cover for smuggling endangered species. The animals arrive documented as legitimate cargo, Agent Torres elaborated, then disappear into private collections or worse, are harvested for parts used in traditional medicines. A wildlife veterinarian named Dr. Chen added grimly, We've intercepted shipments containing tiger bones, rhino horns, and elephant ivory, all destined for black market buyers willing to pay millions. Daniel felt sick imagining Indra suffering such a fate. How many animals are we talking about? Helena's expression was grave. Hundreds each year. Your father isn't just a collector. He's one of the largest wildlife traffickers in the Northern Hemisphere, and one of the most protected, Agent Ramirez noted. Senator Williams has blocked 3 separate investigations into Harrington shipping. Senator
Williams? Daniel recalled the name from his father's frequent dinner guests. He's been to our home many times. He's also received over $2 million in campaign contributions from your father, said a new voice. All heads turned to see
Lydia Chen standing in the doorway, a laptop tucked under her arm. "You must be the journalist my father dealt with," Daniel said, relieved to see her unharmed. "Maxwell's men ransacked my apartment and tried to plant evidence to discredit me," Lydia confirmed, taking a seat at the table. "Fortunately, I wasn't home. I've been following this story too long to be caught off guard." She opened her laptop, displaying a database of political figures linked to Maxwell Harrington. "Your father's influence extends beyond Senator Williams," she explained. 3 judges, the state attorney general, even the head of the regional EPA office, all have received substantial benefits from Maxwell Harrington, which is why we need federal prosecution, Agent Ramirez said, "and why the evidence you've brought us is so crucial, Daniel." Helena directed everyone's attention back to the map. "While the trafficking network is important, our immediate priority is rescuing Sophia Carter." She zoomed in on a remote property in Montana, a modest compound surrounded by dense forest, accessible only by a single dirt road. "This is where your mother is being held," Helena told Daniel. "A hunting lodge officially owned by Mountain Peak Ventures, a shell corporation controlled by your father." "Security?" Agent Torres asked. 4 guards, rotating shifts, electronic surveillance, satellite uplink," Lydia reported. "I've had a contact monitoring the property for months." Daniel studied the images. "How do we get her out?" "Carefully," Helena replied. "Maxwell believes you're still running scared in the woods. He doesn't know you've reached True Haven or connected with federal authorities. That gives us an advantage," Agent Ramirez said. "We can prepare a proper extraction operation while gathering the final evidence needed for warrants." Daniel thought of Elijah. "What about Mr. Kennedy? My father's men took him." Lydia checked her phone. "My sources say he's being held at the Harrington estate, officially for trespassing. He hasn't been charged yet. Maxwell will use him as bait." Daniel realized. "He knows I wouldn't leave Elijah behind." Helena nodded grimly. "Which means we need to move quickly on both fronts, rescuing Sophia and Elijah while securing the evidence to bring down Maxwell's entire operation." The planning continued into the night. Maps were marked, contingencies discussed, resources allocated. Daniel absorbed it all, asking questions and offering insights about his father's methods and properties. As the meeting wound down, Helena took Daniel to a secure room where they could speak privately. "There's something you should see," she said, unlocking a cabinet and removing a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a flash drive. "This contains the complete record of your mother's research, the work Maxwell tried to suppress." She inserted the drive into a computer. Video files appeared on screen showing Sophia Carter working with a younger Indra, demonstrating the communication system they had developed. "This is revolutionary research," Helena explained. "Sophia proved that elephants are capable of abstract thought, symbolic reasoning, and emotional intelligence far beyond what science had previously acknowledged." Daniel watched, transfixed, as his mother guided Indra through increasingly complex cognitive tasks. The elephant wasn't simply responding to commands, but engaging in genuine communication, selecting symbols to express needs, observations, even emotions. "Why would my father want to suppress this? It's incredible." "2 reasons," Helena said. "First, publishing this research would have brought international attention to Indra, making it impossible for Maxwell to exploit her or her cognitive abilities for profit. And second, the research proves elephants have self-awareness, emotional
lives and intelligence comparable in some ways to humans." Helena's expression hardened.
Imagine the impact on the ivory trade if the public fully understood that elephants are not just animals, but persons, non-human persons with rights that should be protected. Daniel thought of the billions flowing through the illegal wildlife trade, the powerful interests involved, the political influence his father wielded. "He buried her research to protect his business," he said, disgust evident in his voice. "And when Sophia threatened to expose both the research and his trafficking operation, he buried her too." Helena closed the computer. Until now, as Daniel prepared to leave, Helena handed him a small device. "This contains a copy of everything. your mother's research, evidence of the trafficking network, financial records linking Maxwell to criminal enterprises. Keep it with you. Why? Because Maxwell Harrington has destroyed evidence before. No matter what happens in the next few days, this ensures the truth will come out. Her eyes were deadly serious. Your father's power comes from secrets, Daniel. Once those secrets are exposed, his empire crumbles. That night, unable to sleep, Daniel visited Indra in the spacious enclosure Helena had prepared. The elephant greeted him with a gentle touch of her trunk, and they sat together under the stars. "We're going to find her," Daniel promised, his hand resting on Indra's weathered skin. "We're going to bring her home and make him pay for what he's done." Indra rumbled softly, a sound so full of emotion that Daniel didn't need any special communication system to understand it. It sounded exactly like hope. Dawn broke over True Haven as final preparations were made. Daniel stood before a mirror, barely recognizing himself. The past 2 weeks had transformed him, not just physically with his longer hair and the lean hardness that had replaced his privileged softness, but in deeper ways. His eyes held a resolve that reminded him of the photographs he'd seen of his mother. "Ready?" Helena asked, entering the room. Daniel nodded, securing the small device containing all their evidence in an inner pocket of his jacket. "As I'll ever be." The plan was risky, but direct. While federal agents prepared warrants and gathered their forces, Daniel would return to the Harrington estate with Lydia and a small team from True Haven. Their official purpose, negotiation for Elijah's release. Their true mission, accessing Maxwell's secure files to find Sophia's exact location and collecting additional evidence for the federal case. "Remember, this is just reconnaissance," Helena cautioned. "No heroics. We need to know exactly where. Your mother is being held before the authorities move in." "I understand," Daniel said, though part of him wanted nothing more than to confront his father immediately. Outside, Lydia waited beside a nondescript SUV. "We'll take this to the main
road," she explained. "From there we go in my news van."
"Maxwell knows me as a journalist. It won't seem unusual for me to seek an interview about Elijah's trespassing." Daniel turned to Indra, who watched from her enclosure. The elephant seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. Her intelligent
eyes following his every move. "I have to go without you this time," he told her softly, "but I'll be back with my mother."
Indra raised her trunk, touching his face in what felt remarkably like a blessing. Helena approached with something in her hands, a small, weathered wooden box. "Sophia would want you to have this," she said, opening it to reveal a simple bracelet, made of braided leather with a small carved elephant charm. "She made identical ones," Helena explained, as Daniel slipped it onto his wrist. "One for herself, one for you. A connection when you couldn't be together." The weight of the bracelet against his skin felt right, as if completing a circuit broken.
"Long ago, let's go," he said, his determination renewed. The journey to the Harrington estate took 3 hours.
As they approached the imposing gates, Daniel's heart pounded against his ribs. This had been his home for 18 years, yet he felt like an infiltrator. "Remember," Lydia murmured as security cameras swiveled toward the van, "you're here reluctantly, at my insistence, to help resolve the Elijah situation peacefully."
"Maxwell will be suspicious, but his ego won't let him believe you dare to challenge him directly." The gates opened, and they were escorted to the main house by armed security. Daniel noted the increased presence of guards. His escape had clearly
rattled his father's sense of control. Maxwell Harrington waited in his study, the picture of composed authority. Only the tightness around his eyes betrayed his tension as Daniel entered with Lydia. "My prodigal son returns," Maxwell said coldly, "and with a journalist no less." "How dramatic, Mr. Harrington," Lydia began with professional detachment. "I'm here to discuss the allegations against Elijah Kennedy and to get your side of the story." "There's no story," Maxwell replied. "Kennedy trespassed on my property and influenced my son with delusional tales. He'll face appropriate legal consequences." "Where?"
"Is he?" Daniel demanded. Maxwell's gaze shifted to his son, assessing. Secure.
And considerably more comfortable than you've been from the look of it. His nostrils flared slightly. You reek of elephant, by the way. I assume my property is still with you. Indra isn't property, Daniel said evenly. She's where she belongs. A muscle twitched in Maxwell's jaw, the only sign that Daniel had struck a nerve. We'll discuss that later. For now, I'm willing to overlook your adventure if you return home permanently. Kennedy's charges could be dropped as well as a gesture of goodwill. Lydia was taking notes, playing her role perfectly. And what about the allegations regarding Dr. Sophia Carter's disappearance? Several former employees have raised concerns. Maxwell's expression didn't change, but Daniel noticed his father's hand tighten almost imperceptibly on his desk. Ancient history. Dr. Carter accepted a position overseas 13 years ago. Any suggestion otherwise is libelous.
Then you wouldn't object to going on record about your relationship with her? Lydia pressed, particularly regarding her research on elephant cognition. For a fraction of a second, uncertainty flickered across Maxwell's face. He hadn't expected
this line of questioning. My wildlife conservation efforts have always supported ethical research, he replied smoothly. Now, if you'll excuse us, Ms. Chen, I'd like a private word with my son. Lydia glanced at Daniel, who nodded slightly. They had anticipated this moment, Maxwell separating them to speak to Daniel alone. Of course, Lydia said, rising. I'll wait outside. As the door closed behind her, Maxwell's facade of civility dropped. What's your game, Daniel? Running away, stealing my elephant, and now returning with a nosy reporter? Did you think I wouldn't notice the surveillance van parked 3 miles down the road? Or the federal agents who've been watching my shipping operations? Daniel's surprise must have shown because Maxwell laughed bitterly. I've been avoiding federal investigations for longer than you've been alive. You're out of your depth. Where is my mother? Daniel asked directly. Maxwell's expression hardened. So that's what this is about. Sophia filled your head with fairy tales about maternal bonds and intelligent elephants, and now you're on some misguided rescue mission. Is she alive? A calculating look crossed Maxwell's face. Come with me, he said abruptly, moving to the hidden panel that concealed his secure room. Inside, Maxwell activated a monitor showing a rustic cabin interior. A woman sat reading by a window, older than in the photographs Daniel had seen, her dark hair now streaked with silver. But unmistakably, Sophia Carter. Satisfied, Maxwell asked. She's perfectly fine, comfortable, safe. Daniel stared at the image, emotions warring within him. Relief that she was alive, rage that she was captive, determination to free her. Why? He asked, his voice raw. Why keep her prisoner all these years? Because she threatened everything I've built, Maxwell replied, his tone almost reasonable. Her research, if published, would have devastated the exotic animal trade. Her evidence about my business operations could have sent me to prison. And she was going to take you, my son, my heir. I was never really your son, Daniel said quietly. Maxwell's expression flickered with something almost like hurt. I raised you, gave you my name, my home, every advantage. Biology is irrelevant. And yet you imprisoned my biological mother for 13 years. I protected my interests, Maxwell corrected coldly, as I always have, as I always will. He turned off the monitor and faced Daniel directly. Now here's what's going to happen. You will call off your journalist friend and whatever federal investigation you've instigated. You will return my elephant. You will resume your proper place in this family and this business. And in return, Sophia will be released, somewhere far away, with enough money to start a new life, provided she signs comprehensive, non-disclosure agreements. Daniel studied the man who had raised him, the practiced confidence, the absolute certainty of his own righteousness. For 18 years he had accepted Maxwell Harrington's version of reality without question. No more. I need to think about it, he said, feigning uncertainty. And I need to see Elijah first, make sure he's,
Okay.
Maxwell nodded, satisfied that his control was reasserting itself. A reasonable request. The old man is in the guest house. I'll have security escort you. As they left the secure room, Daniel glanced at the hidden safe behind Maxwell's desk, where Helena believed additional evidence was kept. Somehow, he would need to access it before they left. The chess match had begun, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Elijah Kennedy sat on the edge of a bed in the luxuriously appointed guest house, looking remarkably composed for a man under house arrest. When Daniel entered, the old man's weathered face creased with relief. "They didn't hurt you," Daniel said, embracing him. "Your father wants me discredited, not martyred," Elijah replied. He lowered his voice. "The room is likely bugged," Daniel
Nodded almost imperceptibly. "Father has agreed to drop the charges against you if I come home," he said, loudly enough to be heard by any listening devices.
Then, in a whisper, "I saw her. She's alive. We're getting you both out tonight." Elijah's eyes widened, but he maintained his composure. "You shouldn't sacrifice your future for an old man like me," he replied at normal volume. Their conversation continued in this dual manner, spoken words for the surveillance, whispered exchanges planning their next moves. Daniel explained the federal investigation, the evidence they'd gathered, and the teams positioned around the estate. "Maxwell keeps his most sensitive files in a hidden safe," Elijah whispered, "behind the Remington painting in his study." "I
"Saw it?" Daniel confirmed. "But I don't have the combination." "Try 10-1705, Elijah suggested. "The day you were born."
When they emerged from the guest house, Lydia was waiting with Maria, who had apparently been serving refreshments during the journalist's wait. The housekeeper's eyes met Daniel's with silent communication. She was still their ally inside the
"Mansion. Mr. Kennedy appears well," Lydia remarked professionally, as they walked back toward the main house.
"Has he made any statements regarding the allegations?" Daniel played along with the pretense. "He's confused but cooperative. I think this situation can be resolved without legal action." As they entered the main house, Maxwell was speaking with his security chief in the foyer. He broke off when he saw them, dismissing the man with a sharp gesture. "Satisfied that the old man hasn't been tortured?" he asked Daniel sardonically. "He should never have been detained in the first place," Daniel replied. Maxwell waved this away. "Have you considered my offer?" "I have," Daniel said, "but I need assurances."
"Real ones? Not just your word." "Such as?" "I want to speak to my mother directly, not just see her on a monitor." Maxwell's expression hardened. "Impossible. She's not on the property." "Then bring her here," Daniel insisted, "or take me to her."
"I need to hear from her own lips that she's willing to accept your terms." A calculating look crossed Maxwell's face. "Perhaps that could be arranged. It would take time, however." "How much time?" "A day or two. She's at a secure location several hours from here." Daniel knew this was a lie. The surveillance footage had shown Sophia in real time, not recorded, but he feigned acceptance. "Then I'll wait, here, at the estate." "Fine," Maxwell agreed, too quickly. "You and Ms. Chen can stay overnight. We'll discuss the details in the morning." He checked his watch. "I have calls to make. Maria will show you to your rooms." As Maxwell strode away, Maria approached with perfect housekeeper composure. "This way, please," she said formally. Once they were upstairs and out of earshot, her manner changed completely. "He's lying," she whispered urgently. "He's been on the phone all morning with the security team at the Montana property. They're preparing to move her." Daniel tensed. "How soon?" "Tonight. A private helicopter is on standby." Lydia exchanged alarmed glances with Daniel. "We need to move up our timeline," Maria nodded. "Mr. Harrington will be in video conferences for the next hour. It's your only chance to access his study." "What about security?" Daniel asked. "I'll handle it," Maria promised. "Be ready in 20
minutes. While they waited, Daniel briefed Lydia on what he'd learned from Elijah. "If we can get into that safe, we'll have everything we need for the federal case. Plus, hopefully, Sophia's exact location."
"And if we can't?" Daniel touched the device hidden in his jacket, containing the evidence they already had. Then we proceed with what we have. Either way, we're ending this today. 20 minutes later, Maria returned. Security cameras in the tool. East Wing will experience technical difficulties for the next 15 minutes, she reported. The guard is distracted by a small kitchen fire. Mr. Harrington is still on his call. They moved swiftly through the mansion's corridors, Lydia recording everything on a concealed camera. When they reached Maxwell's study, Daniel went directly to the Remington painting, swinging it aside to reveal the safe. He entered the combination Elijah had suggested, 10 for 1705. Nothing happened. Daniel frowned, then tried again, this time entering. Were 5, 10, 17, adjusting for the different date format. The safe remained locked. It's not my birthday, Daniel realized aloud. Try 062205. What's that date? Lydia asked as he entered the numbers. The day Indra was born, according to my mother's journal. The safe clicked open. Inside were files, external hard drives, and a small leather-bound book. Daniel grabbed everything, stuffing it into the backpack Maria had provided. We need to go, Maria urged, checking her watch. The security system will reset soon. They had almost reached the door when it swung open, revealing Maxwell Harrington. His expression shifted from surprise to cold fury as he took in the scene. Daniel, with the backpack, the open safe, Lydia's concealed camera, now visible. I should
have known, he said quietly. You're even more like your mother than I realized. Daniel stepped forward protectively, positioning himself between Maxwell and the women. It's over, Father.
We have everything. The trafficking records, the financial transactions, the evidence of Sophia's abduction, evidence that will never see daylight, Maxwell replied, his hand moving to his jacket pocket. Did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies for this exact scenario? The security system chimed as it reset, and footsteps pounded in the hallway, guards responding to some silent alarm Maxwell must have triggered. We need to leave. Now, Lydia urged. Maxwell drew a small handgun from his pocket. No one is going
anywhere. The standoff was broken by a new arrival. Helena Wright stepped into the study, followed by Agents Ramirez and Torres.
Maxwell Harrington, Agent Ramirez announced formally, we have a federal warrant to search these premises and seize evidence related to violations of the Endangered Species Act, racketeering, kidnapping, and a dozen other charges. Maxwell's owl face contorted with rage. You have no jurisdiction here. My lawyers will— Your lawyers can't help you this time, Agent Torres interrupted, displaying a document. This warrant was signed by a federal judge after we presented preliminary evidence of your wildlife trafficking operation. Senator Williams won't be running interference anymore. He's being questioned as we speak. As the agents read Maxwell, his rights, Daniel opened the leather book from the safe. It was a personal journal, Maxwell's private thoughts recorded over 13 years. The entries revealed an obsession with controlling Sophia, keeping her research suppressed, and maintaining his trafficking empire. There's more, Daniel said, scanning the pages. The Montana property, directions, security protocols, staff schedules.
Everything we need to rescue my mother. Helena squeezed his shoulder. The extraction team is already on standby. As soon as we confirm the location, they'll move in. Maxwell, now handcuffed, fixed Daniel with a look of cold hatred. You think this is victory? You've destroyed your own legacy. Everything I built was meant for you. You built it on suffering, Daniel replied. On trafficking endangered animals, on keeping my mother prisoner, on lies. That's not a legacy I want.
As the agents led Maxwell away, Daniel turned to Helena. I'm going with the extraction team. I need to be there when they find her. Helena nodded, understanding. The helicopter is waiting. But Daniel, prepare yourself. 13 years in captivity. She may not be the same person you've come to know through her journals. Daniel touched the braided bracelet on his wrist, the carved elephant, a tangible connection to the mother he barely remembered. She survived, he said simply. That's all that matters now. Twilight shrouded the Montana wilderness in purple shadows as the helicopter carrying Daniel and the extraction team approached the coordinates. Below, a small compound nestled against a mountainside, the hunting lodge where Sophia Carter had spent 13 years in captivity. Daniel studied the satellite imagery on the tablet before him, his heart pounding. After all the searching, all the danger, his mother was less than a mile away. 4 guards on rotation, the team leader, a former military specialist named Rivera, reminded them. 2 at the main entrance, 1 patrolling the perimeter, 1 inside with the target. Subject, Daniel corrected automatically. Not target, Rivera nodded respectfully. With the subject, our priority is her safety. Federal agents have warrants for the guard's arrest, but we're authorized to move before they arrive if necessary. The helicopter landed in a clearing 2 miles from the compound. The team moved out on foot, using the forest as cover. Daniel kept pace, grateful for the tactical training Helena's team had given him over the past days. As they approached the compound's perimeter, Rivera held up a hand, signaling them to stop. Through night vision binoculars, he observed the security patterns. Something's wrong, he said. There's increased activity. They're loading equipment into vehicles. Daniel's blood ran cold. They're evacuating, moving her. Rivera made a quick decision. We move now. Team 2, secure the vehicles. Team 1, with me on the main entrance. Daniel, stay with Dr. Abrams. He indicated the team's medical specialist. Daniel wanted to protest, but knew he lacked the training for the assault phase. Instead, he watched as the teams moved into position with practiced efficiency. What happened next was a blur of precision and controlled chaos. Flashbang grenades disoriented the guards. The extraction team swarmed the compound. Shouts echoed through the trees, followed by the brief pop of what Daniel hoped were tranquilizer guns rather than lethal weapons. Compound secure, came Rivera's
voice through the radio. 2 guards in custody. 2 fled into the woods. Federal agents are in pursuit. And my mother.
Daniel asked urgently. A pause. Then, we have a female subject mid-40s, appears unharmed but disoriented, bringing her out now. Daniel's legs carried him forward before he could think, ignoring Dr. Abrams's calls to wait. He ran toward the compound where figures were emerging from the main building. In the center of the group, supported by Rivera and a female team member, walked a woman. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, her thin frame dwarfed by the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. But her posture was straight, defiant even in her evident exhaustion. Daniel stopped, suddenly uncertain. The woman looked up, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar faces surrounding her. Then her gaze found him, and time seemed to freeze. Daniel. Her voice was barely audible, rough from disuse or emotion. Mom, he managed, the word foreign yet instinctive on his tongue. Sophia Carter took 1 tentative step forward, then another. Daniel moved toward her, closing the distance between them, and then she was in his arms. This stranger who was his mother. This woman who had sacrificed everything to protect him. You found me, she whispered against his shoulder. You actually
found me. Indra helped, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. She remembered everything you taught her.
Sophia pulled back, searching his face with wonder. Indra? She's alive? She's safe? She's waiting for you, Daniel assured her. At True Haven. Recognition flashed in Sophia's eyes. Helena's sanctuary. You found them too. A trembling smile crossed her face. You put it all together just as I hoped you would. Dr. Abrams approached gently. Dr. Carter, I need to examine you. Make sure you're all right for transport. Sophia nodded, but kept hold of Daniel's hand as they walked to the medical station set up near the helicopter, while the doctor checked. Her vital signs, Sophia filled in the gaps of her captivity. Maxwell kept me isolated but comfortable, she explained. A gilded cage. I had books, basic medical care, even a computer, though no internet access, of course. Why not just Daniel couldn't finish the question. Sophia understood. Kill me? She smiled sadly. 2 reasons. First, Maxwell never does anything that can't be undone if circumstances change. Keeping me alive meant he always had leverage, a bargaining chip. And the second reason? Something complicated crossed Sophia's face, a mixture of disgust and pity in his own twisted way. I believe he thought he loved me, or at least he loved possessing me, controlling me. The doctor finished her examination. You're malnourished and showing signs of long-term stress, but otherwise physically healthy. I recommend immediate hospital evaluation once we return. However, Sophia shook her head firmly. No hospitals, not yet. I need to see Indra first. She looked at Daniel. You understand, don't you? He did. After 13 years of separation, reuniting with the elephant who had been her research subject, companion, and link to her son was Sophia's priority. We'll go straight to True Haven, he promised. As they boarded the helicopter, federal agents arrived to secure the compound and collect evidence. Daniel briefed them on Maxwell's arrest and the evidence recovered from the estate. It's really over, Sophia said wonderingly as the helicopter lifted off. All these years, planning, leaving clues, hoping you would find them someday. Why? Didn't you try to escape? Daniel asked, the question that had been bothering him. Sophia's expression grew somber. I did, twice in the early years. The first time Maxwell threatened to sell Indra to a collector in China who wanted her for ivory. The second time, she took a shuddering breath. He showed me photos of you at school playing sports, told me his security team could reach
you any time. Daniel felt sick with fury at the manipulation, the threats used to control her. After that, I changed strategies, Sophia continued.
Instead of escaping, I focused on leaving breadcrumbs, teaching Indra communication symbols, hiding journals, creating a path that might someday lead you to me, but you couldn't know if I'd ever find them, if I'd even care about a mother I didn't remember. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. That was the hardest part, not knowing if you remembered me at all, if Maxwell had poisoned your mind against me, if you even knew I existed. Daniel took her hand, showing her the braided bracelet on his wrist. I didn't remember consciously, but something in me recognized the truth when I found your journals, when Indra protected me. Sophia touched the bracelet, then revealed an identical one on her own wrist, worn and faded, but intact. I made these the week before Maxwell took me away, one for each of us. The helicopter journey passed with Sophia asking about Daniel's life, his education, interests, friends, simple questions from a mother who had missed everything. Daniel, in turn, told her about finding the adoption papers, confronting Maxwell, the chase through the forest, and Indra's unexpected intervention. She never forgot, Sophia said, pride evident in her voice. All those years at the sanctuary, she was waiting for the right moment. As dawn broke over the mountains, the helicopter approached True Haven. Sophia pressed her face to the window, gasping when she saw the sanctuary spread out below. The animal enclosures, the research facilities, the rehabilitation areas. Helena
built all this, she whispered, just as we planned. They landed on a pad near the main building. Helena was waiting, tears streaming unchecked down her face as Sophia emerged from the helicopter. The two women embraced. 13 years of separation,
dissolving in a moment of reunion. No words were needed. Their shared dream of the sanctuary, realized in Sophia's absence, spoke volumes. There's someone else waiting to see you, Helena said when they finally separated. She led them to Indra's enclosure, where the elephant stood. Watching their approach, her trunk raised as if catching their scent on the morning breeze. Sophia stopped at the gate, her composure finally breaking. Sobs shook her thin frame as she gazed at the elephant she had raised from a calf, the remarkable being who had helped reunite her with her son, Indra. She called softly, "It's me."
I'm back. The elephant's response was immediate and overwhelming.
A trumpet of joy echoed across the sanctuary as Indra rushed to the fence, trunk extended toward the human she had not seen in 13 years, but had clearly never forgotten. Daniel opened the gate, and Sophia stepped through. Indra's trunk gently enveloped her, drawing her close in what could only be described as an embrace. Sophia pressed her forehead against the elephant's broad head, whispering words too soft for others to hear. And then Indra did something extraordinary. She knelt, lowering herself to the ground in invitation. "She wants us both," Sophia said, turning to Daniel with her hand extended. "Come, meet your family properly." Daniel joined them, climbing onto Indra's back beside his mother. The elephant rose carefully and began to walk, carrying mother and son around the sanctuary in a triumphant procession. "We're free," Sophia whispered, her arm around Daniel. "All three of us, finally free." The federal courthouse buzzed with activity as Daniel and Sophia made their way through security. 3 months had passed since Sophia's rescue, months of healing, reconnection, and preparation for this day. Maxwell Harrington's trial for wildlife trafficking, kidnapping, and racketeering was the highest-profile case the state had seen in decades. "Ready?" Daniel asked, offering his arm to his mother. Sophia nodded, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. The months of freedom had transformed her. Proper nutrition had restored her health. Therapy had helped address the trauma of her captivity, and reuniting with Daniel and Indra had rekindled her spirit. Today, dressed in a simple navy suit, she looked every inch the brilliant researcher she had been before Maxwell took her freedom. Inside, the courtroom was packed with journalists, including Lydia Chen, whose explosive series on the Harrington trafficking network had earned her a Pulitzer nomination. Federal prosecutors had built an airtight case using the evidence from Maxwell's safe, Sophia's journals, and testimony from dozens of former employees who had come forward once Maxwell's protection collapsed. Maxwell sat at the defense table, still immaculate in an expensive suit, but diminished somehow. The months in federal detention had stripped away his aura of invincibility. When he turned and saw Sophia and Daniel enter, his face betrayed a flicker of emotion before settling back into practiced neutrality. The proceedings began with opening statements. The prosecution outlined the decades-long wildlife trafficking operation, the political corruption that had protected it, and the personal crimes against Sophia Carter. The evidence will show, the lead prosecutor concluded, that Maxwell Harrington built an empire on endangered species, corruption, and the imprisonment of a woman whose only crime was discovering the truth. Maxwell's defense team argued that the wildlife sanctuary had operated legally, that Sophia had stayed at the Montana property voluntarily as part of a private arrangement, and that any financial irregularities were the work of subordinates acting without Maxwell's knowledge. As the first witness was called, Daniel squeezed his mother's hand. "You don't have to stay for all of this." "Yes, I do," Sophia replied quietly. 13 years, Daniel. I need to see justice done." The prosecution's case unfolded methodically over the next 2 weeks. Financial experts detailed the money trail of the trafficking operation. Former employees testified about midnight deliveries of exotic animals. Scientists confirmed the endangered status of species found at Harrington properties. And then it was Sophia's turn. She walked to the witness, stand with quiet dignity, swore to tell the truth, and faced the prosecutor's questions with unwavering clarity. "Dr. Carter, could you please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant?" Sophia recounted her initial hiring as a researcher, her relationship with Maxwell, her pregnancy, and the coercive adoption arrangement that followed. "He told me I could continue my research and be near my son, but only if I legally surrendered my parental rights," she explained. "At the time it seemed like the only option." "And when did you discover the defendant's wildlife trafficking operation?" 3 years into my employment. "I noticed discrepancies in the animal inventory, shipping manifests that didn't match official records. When I investigated further, I found evidence linking Harrington shipping to illegal wildlife transportation worldwide." "What did you do with this information?" I gathered evidence, prepared to contact authorities. But first, I confronted Maxwell directly. Sophia's gaze shifted briefly to her former captor. I believed, naively perhaps, that he might not fully understand the impact of his business, that he might change course if presented with the facts. And what was his response? He offered me a partnership, said there were billions to be made in the exotic animal trade, that we could build an empire together. Sophia's voice remained steady. When I refused and threatened to expose him, he became enraged. That was the last normal day of my life for 13 years. Sophia detailed her captivity, the isolation, the threats against Daniel and Indra, the psychological manipulation Maxwell had employed to keep her compliant. Why not attempt escape? The prosecutor asked. I did, twice. The first time, he threatened to sell Indra to a buyer who wanted her tusks. The second time, he showed me surveillance photos of Daniel at school, implied his security team could reach my son any time. Sophia's composure wavered for the first time. After that, I changed strategies. Instead of escaping, I focused on leaving clues that might someday lead Daniel to me. When the prosecution finished, Maxwell's attorney approached for cross-examination. His strategy quickly became clear. Portray Sophia as mentally unstable, her claims of captivity as delusions. Dr. Carter, isn't it true that you were provided a comfortable home, medical care, and all necessities during your stay in Montana? I was imprisoned in a comfortable cage, Sophia corrected. The difference is consent and freedom, counselor. You
had a phone, correct? A computer? Yet you never called 911, never emailed for help. The phone was restricted to internal numbers only. The computer had no internet access. Sophia remained unruffled. Maxwell thought of everything.
The attorney changed tactics. Let's discuss your research. You claimed elephants could communicate using symbols, that they possessed near-human intelligence. Weren't these theories rejected by the scientific community as anthropomorphic projection? My research was never published, so the scientific community had no opportunity to evaluate it, Sophia replied, but the evidence speaks for itself. My elephant Indra not only learned over 250 distinct symbols, but combined them in novel ways to express original thoughts. And 13 years after I taught her emergency protocols, she remembered them perfectly, helping my son escape Maxwell's
guards and ultimately leading him to me. The defense attorney scoffed. You're asking the court to believe an elephant orchestrated your son's escape, remembered protocols after 13 years? I'm asking the court to accept the scientific
evidence, Sophia replied calmly. Elephants have demonstrated memory spanning decades in the wild. Their cognitive abilities are among the most advanced of any non-human species. Indra's actions are remarkable but consistent with what we know about elephant intelligence. By the time cross-examination ended, Maxwell's attorney had succeeded only in highlighting Sophia's intelligence and composure. As she returned to her seat beside Daniel, Maxwell caught her eye. Something passed between them, not forgiveness, but perhaps a final acknowledgement. The man who had controlled her life for so long now sat powerless as his fate was decided. You were amazing, Daniel whispered as she sat down. Sophia squeezed his hand. Truth is powerful. That's why he feared it so much. The trial continued with more witnesses, more evidence. Senator Williams testified as part of his plea agreement, detailing how Maxwell had purchased political protection. Maxwell's former security chief confirmed the surveillance and threats against Sophia and Daniel. When the prosecution rested, Maxwell's defense seemed hollow. Technical arguments about chain of custody, procedural complaints, attempts to shift blame to subordinates. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning with their verdict. On the count of kidnapping and false imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. On the counts of wildlife trafficking and violations of the Endangered Species Act, we find the defendant guilty. On the counts of racketeering and conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty. As the litany of guilty verdicts continued, Sophia closed her eyes briefly. 13 years of captivity finally receiving justice. Maxwell Harrington, the man who had once seemed untouchable, was led away in handcuffs to await sentencing, facing what would likely amount to life imprisonment. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Daniel protected his mother from the crush, but Sophia paused on the steps, her voice clear as she addressed the media. Today isn't about
vengeance. It's about accountability for crimes against people, against animals, against the natural world we all share. No one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, should be above that accountability. As they walked away from the cameras, Sophia added quietly, "For Daniel alone, now we can truly begin again." 6 months after Maxwell Harrington's conviction, a
very different scene unfolded at the estate that had once been his private kingdom. Yellow school buses lined the circular driveway as children poured out, chattering excitedly. A banner stretched across the mansion's entrance. "Welcome to Harrington Wildlife Rehabilitation and Education Center." Daniel stood on the front steps, watching the transformation with a sense of wonder. After Maxwell's assets were frozen pending his sentencing, the court had appointed Daniel and Sophia as conservators of the estate and its animals. Rather than sell the property, they had reimagined it entirely. "The fourth graders are here," Maria called from the doorway. "Now the center's administrative director rather than a housekeeper." The position suited her. She moved with a confidence that had been carefully hidden during Maxwell's reign. "I'll meet them at the sanctuary," Daniel replied. "Is Mom ready?" "Already there with Indra." You know those two, inseparable. Daniel made his way through the grounds, now beautifully landscaped with native plants and educational signage. The garish displays of wealth that had characterized his father's decorating style had been replaced with natural materials and informative exhibits about wildlife conservation. At the former exotic collection, now a legitimate sanctuary, Sophia waited with a small group of staff. Beside her stood Indra, adorned with a colorful blanket for the special occasion, but otherwise unrestrained. The elephant watched the approaching children with what Daniel had learned to recognize as curiosity. "Remember, gentle introductions," Sophia reminded the staff. "Some of these children have never seen an elephant up close." She caught sight of Daniel and smiled warmly. The past 6 months had been healing for them both, establishing boundaries, building a relationship that honored their shared past while acknowledging the years of separation. They were family, not by Maxwell's legal machinations, but by choice and genuine love. The children arrived wide-eyed at the sight of Indra. Their teacher, a young woman named Ms. Patel, organized them into a semicircle. "Everyone, this is Dr. Carter and Mr. Harrington," she announced. "And this is Indra, the elephant you've been learning about in class." A little girl raised her hand immediately. "Is it true she rescued you from the bad man?" Sophia exchanged an amused glance with Daniel. Their story had become something of a modern fairy tale, despite their efforts to keep details private. "Indra helped us find each other," Sophia explained diplomatically. "Today, she's going to show you how elephants communicate." What followed was a demonstration that left even the adult chaperones astonished. Sophia and Indra performed their communication routine. The elephant selecting symbols on large cards to form simple sentences, responding to questions, even demonstrating rudimentary arithmetic by selecting the correct number of objects. "Elephants are among the most intelligent animals on Earth," Sophia explained to the rapt audience. "They have complex social structures, experience emotions like grief and joy, and can solve problems creatively." "Like figuring out how to open gates?" asked a boy, clearly familiar with Indra's exploits. "Exactly like that," Sophia confirmed with a smile. After the demonstration, the children were led in small groups to visit other rehabilitated animals, all former collections of Maxwell, now receiving proper care while awaiting possible release. Back into protected habitats, Daniel remained behind with Sophia and Indra, enjoying a quiet moment together. "1 year ago today," he noted. "I was running through the snow with the dogs behind me." Sophia slipped her arm through his. "And now look at us." The transformation went beyond the estate. The extensive evidence uncovered during Maxwell's trial had led to dozens of additional arrests, disrupting wildlife trafficking networks across 3 continents. The Harrington fortune, built partly on legitimate business, partly on illegal trade, had been seized with substantial portions allocated to conservation efforts and restitution. For Daniel, the personal transformation had been equally profound. He had deferred his return to Yale, instead working alongside his mother to establish the rehabilitation center. In the process, he had discovered a passion for conservation law, planning to eventually combine his business background with legal training to protect endangered species through legislative and corporate channels. "Ms. Chen is here," called one of the staff members, interrupting their reflection. Lydia approached, no longer just a journalist, but a friend who had shared their journey. Her series on the Harrington case had indeed won the Pulitzer, bringing international attention to wildlife trafficking and spurring new legislation. "The documentary crew is set up by the lake," she informed them. "Whenever you're ready." The documentary, produced by a major streaming service, would tell the story of Indra, Sophia, and Daniel, highlighting both the illegal wildlife trade and the remarkable cognitive abilities of elephants. The proceeds would fund research and conservation. "Is Elijah there already?" Sophia asked. "Holding court with the director," Lydia confirmed with a smile. "Telling elephant stories that get more dramatic with each retelling." The old zookeeper had found his purpose as the center's educational director, his decades of experience and natural storytelling ability making him a favorite with visitors. As they walked toward the lake, Indra ambling beside them, Daniel reflected on how thoroughly his life had changed. The privileged but emotionally barren existence under Maxwell's roof had given way to something richer, more meaningful, a life of purpose, of genuine connections. The transformation of the Harrington estate was more than symbolic. It represented the possibility of redemption, of turning something exploitative into something nurturing. The private collection that had imprisoned magnificent creatures had become a sanctuary where they could heal. The mansion that had been a monument to one man's ego now educated children about conservation and compassion. They reached the lakeside, where filming equipment was arranged near the water's edge. This spot, where Sophia had once brought a toddler, Daniel, to play with a young Indra, had been the beginning she had referenced in her hidden clues. Now it represented a new beginning for all of them. Elijah greeted them enthusiastically. "I was just telling them about the time Indra figured out the irrigation system and gave herself a shower during a heat wave. She's always been too smart." "For her own good," Sophia said fondly, patting the elephant's trunk. As the crew prepared for the interview, Daniel gazed across the lake to the distant mountains. Somewhere beyond them, his father served his sentence in a federal prison. Daniel had visited once, 3 months after the conviction, not seeking reconciliation, but closure. Maxwell had been subdued, his power and arrogance diminished by confinement. "Did love you," Maxwell had said at the end of their brief, stilted conversation. "In my way, I know," Daniel had replied. "That's what makes it all so tragic." He hadn't returned since. Some relationships couldn't be repaired and shouldn't be. Some chapters needed to be closed completely before new ones could begin. The documentary director approached, interrupting his thoughts. "We're ready for you now, all 3 of you." Daniel, Sophia, and Indra took their positions by the lake. As the camera rolled, they told their intertwined story of separation and reunion, of captivity and freedom, of a bond that transcended species and survived 13 years of forced separation. "What's next for Indra?" the director asked. As Davta. The interview concluded. Sophia smiled, running her hand along the elephant's trunk. "That's her choice. This sanctuary is her home as long as she wants it to be. But we're also working with a protected elephant habitat in Kenya that might be suitable if she ever shows interest in joining a wild herd. And she gets to choose Freedom means making your own choices, Sophia replied simply. Something both Indra and I value deeply after so many years without it. As if understanding, Indra raised her trunk and gently touched Sophia's cheek, a deep gesture of such obvious affection that the film crew fell silent in wonder. Some transformations, Daniel reflected, watching his mother and the elephant who had saved them both, were almost too beautiful for words. 1 year to the day after the Harrington Wildlife Rehabilitation and Education Center opened its doors, the sanctuary buzzed with activity. Visitors from across the country had gathered to celebrate the anniversary and witness the release of 3 rehabilitated Bengal tigers into a sprawling new habitat designed to mimic their natural environment. Daniel, now 20, led a tour group through the main educational facility. His confidence and knowledge had grown over the past year as he'd immersed himself in the work of conservation and education. These tigers were confiscated from private owners who purchased them illegally as cubs, he explained to the attentive group. They can never be released into the wild, but here they'll have 5 acres to roam, environmental enrichment, and specialized care. A young boy raised his hand. Will they be sad they can't go home? Daniel smiled at the thoughtful question. These tigers were born in captivity. They've never known the wild. For them, this sanctuary is the closest thing to a natural home they've ever experienced. But your question gets at something really important. The best place for wild animals is in their natural habitats. That's why half of our work focuses on protecting those habitats from destruction. As the tour continued, Daniel noticed his mother crossing the courtyard with a group of university researchers. In the year since her rescue, Sophia had re-established herself in the scientific community. Her groundbreaking work on elephant cognition, suppressed for so long by Maxwell, had finally been published, sparking new understanding of animal intelligence and renewed commitment to protection. The tour concluded at the elephant enclosure, where Indra was demonstrating her communication skills for a rapt audience. Using her trunk to select symbols on a large board, she was conversing with Elijah about her preferences for dinner. As you can see, Daniel told his group, elephants aren't just intelligent, they're capable of abstract thought, emotional reasoning, and complex problem-solving. Indra knows over 300 symbols and can combine them to express original concepts. Like what? Asked a teenage girl. Well, last month, she created a new symbol combination we'd never taught her, Daniel replied with a grin. She put together water, cold, and fun to ask for ice cubes in her pool during a heat wave. The audience laughed appreciatively, watching as Indra accepted apple slices from Elijah, her favorite treat. After the tour dispersed, Daniel joined his mother at the small lake where they often ended their days. The setting sun painted the water gold, reminding him of that first morning at True Haven when he'd watched Indra carry his mother in triumphant procession around the sanctuary. "Successful day," Sophia commented, patting the bench beside her. Daniel sat, stretching his legs. "The tiger release went perfectly. Dr. Rivera says they're already exploring their habitat." I saw. Beautiful animals. Sophia's expression turned, reflective. "I was thinking about your father today." Daniel raised an eyebrow. They rarely discussed Maxwell, who continued to serve his sentence in federal prison. "Any particular reason?" "The irony of it all," Sophia replied. "He built this place as a monument to his power, his ability to possess rare things others couldn't have. Now it's become the opposite, a place of liberation, of sharing knowledge freely." "Poetic justice," Daniel agreed. "I've decided to visit him," Sophia said after a pause. "Not for reconciliation, but for closure. There are things I need to say for myself, not for him." Daniel nodded, understanding. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No. This is something I need to do alone." She squeezed his hand. "But thank you for offering." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Indra, who had finished her demonstration and ambled down to join them by the lake. The elephant's presence was comfortable, familiar, a constant in their reconstructed lives. "Speaking of new beginnings," Daniel said as Indra settled nearby, "I've decided to accept Yale's offer to return in the fall." Sophia looked both pleased and slightly sad. "Law school?" "Environmental law, with a focus on international wildlife protection." Daniel had found his calling through the most unexpected circumstances. "The foundation will cover operations here, and Maria and Elijah have proven they can manage day-to-day activities." "You'll be missed," Sophia said softly, "but it's the right decision. There are legal battles to be fought if we're going to make lasting change." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the sunset reflect on the water. So much had happened in the span of 18 months. Loss and discovery, danger and rescue, endings and beginnings. The journey that had begun with a terrified flight through snowy woods had led to this peaceful moment beside a lake, their lives transformed in ways neither could have imagined. Indra's trunk reached out, gently touching first Sophia's shoulder, then Daniel's, as if connecting them, reinforcing the unlikely family bond that had survived separation, captivity, and danger. "She still amazes me," Daniel said. "After everything she's been through, she chooses to stay. Elephants understand loyalty and family better than most humans," Sophia replied. "In the wild, they form lifelong bonds, maintain complex social networks, mourn their dead. Indra considers us her herd." The sanctuary's evening bells chimed softly, signaling closing time for visitors. In the distance, staff members could be seen completing their tasks, preparing the animals for night. The rehabilitation center had grown to employ 30 full-time caregivers, researchers, and educators, many of them formerly employed by Maxwell but now dedicated to undoing the damage of the trafficking networks they had once served. "I never imagined this outcome," Daniel admitted. "When I found those adoption papers in Father's study, I was just angry, confused. I never thought it would lead to all of this." "Life rarely follows the paths we expect," Sophia said, her gaze distant. 13 years ago I thought I'd lost everything. My freedom, my research, my son. Now I have all three back, plus something I never expected." "What's that?" "Purpose beyond myself," she replied. "What happened to us, what Maxwell did, was terrible. But look what's grown from it." She gestured to the sanctuary around them. Dozens of animals rescued, habitats protected, children learning about conservation. Your path toward environmental law. As darkness fell, lights illuminated, the paths winding through the sanctuary. The tigers could be heard in the distance, exploring their new territory. Somewhere in the rehabilitation barns, veterinarians tended to recently arrived animals confiscated from trafficking operations the Foundation had helped expose. "We should head back," Daniel said finally. "The anniversary dinner starts in an
hour." They rose, walking side by side with Indra, following contentedly. The elephant would return to her spacious enclosure for the night, not a cage, but a safe haven with room to roam, pools to bathe in, and enrichment activities to engage.
Her remarkable mind. At the main building they paused. Helena Wright and the team from True Haven had arrived for the celebration, along with Lydia Chen and federal agents Ramirez and Torres, whose work continued to dismantle trafficking networks worldwide. "Go ahead," Sophia told Daniel. "I want
a moment with Indra before joining you." Daniel entered the building, leaving mother and elephant in the peaceful courtyard.
Sophia reached up to touch Indra's weathered face, the connection between them visible even to observers who knew nothing of their shared history. "We made it," she whispered to the elephant. "Against all odds, we found our way back to each other." Indra's trunk curled gently around Sophia's wrist, where the braided bracelet with its carved elephant charm still resided, a symbol of faith kept through 13 years of separation. Inside, Daniel greeted the guests, accepting congratulations on the sanctuary's successful first year. But his gaze kept returning to the window, where his mother stood, silhouetted against the evening sky, communing with the elephant who had saved them both. Some might call what had happened a miracle, Daniel reflected. Others might attribute it to the remarkable intelligence of an elephant who remembered lessons taught years before. Scientists might point to the power of early bonding, the mysterious connections between species who recognize something of themselves in each other. Whatever the explanation, the result was undeniable. A family reunited, a sanctuary created, a legacy of exploitation transformed into one of protection and education. As Sophia finally entered the building, her face serene after her private moment with Indra, Daniel raised his glass in a toast to new beginnings, he said simply, and to the remarkable bonds that survive against all odds. The assembled guests echoed the sentiment, unaware of the elephant who watched from the courtyard, her intelligent eyes reflecting the lights of the celebration. If you found this story of redemption and unlikely bonds touching, please like and subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who believes in second chances or has experienced the healing power of connection. Whether with humans or animals, let compassion grow by passing this message of hope to others who might need it most.